What if turning 70 does not tell you nearly as much about the future as you think? Two people can be exactly the same age. Both can be 70. Both can have gray hair, a few aches, and a few medical issues. But watch them for one ordinary day, and you may notice something very different. One person is constantly thinking about what their body can no longer do. The other gets out of bed, gets dressed, walks around the house, makes breakfast, goes outside, calls a friend, works in the garden, drives somewhere, learns something new, and starts making plans for next month. They are both 70, but their lives are telling a very different story. And here's the surprising part. Some of the clues that a person is aging well are not hidden inside an expensive scan or some complicated test. They can appear in tiny, everyday moments. The way they stand up, the way they walk, how they recover when life knocks them down, whether they still have something to look forward to, whether they still have people to call, whether they're curious about something they don't understand yet, whether they wake up feeling restored, and whether they still make plans for a future they expect to be part of. Now, this does not mean that one ability can predict exactly how long someone will live. It can't. No checklist can promise that a 70-year-old will reach 80, 90, or 100. But there are patterns associated with better physical function, independence, social connection, and healthy aging. Staying physically active, for example, can help older adults maintain the ability to perform everyday tasks and remain independent. So today, we're not trying to predict someone's birthday far into the future. We're looking for something much more useful. Signs that the person still has reserve. Reserve is what allows you to handle an ordinary day, deal with a difficult week, recover from a setback, and keep participating in your own life. And some of these signs are so ordinary that you may have never thought of them as signs at all. So if you are over 70, approaching 70, or watching this because someone you love is in their 70s, stay with me, because the last sign may change the way you think about what a long life really means. Let's start with something incredibly simple, a chair. Imagine a 70-year-old sitting in a normal chair. When it's time to stand, do they have to rock forward several times, grab both armrests, pull themselves up, and carefully search for something to hold? Or can they lean forward, push through their legs, stand up, steady themselves, and start walking? That tiny movement can tell us a surprising amount about everyday physical function. Getting out of a chair requires strength, coordination, balance, and enough leg power to move your own body. The ability to get up from a chair, walk, and handle everyday tasks is an important part of maintaining independence as people age. And here's what makes this interesting. You don't need to look athletic. You don't need perfect knees. You don't need to move like you did at 30. The real question is, can your body still do what your life asks of it? Can you stand up from the dining table? Can you walk to the kitchen? Can you get out of bed? Can you get dressed without turning the whole process into a major project? Can you carry a light bag from one room to another? Can you move around your home without constantly looking for somewhere to sit? These are ordinary movements, but ordinary movements make up almost your entire day, and that's why they matter. A person may have some health problems on paper and still preserve a surprising amount of function. Another person may have fewer diagnosed problems, but be losing their ability to move through daily life. So don't only ask, what illnesses does this person have? Ask, What can this person still do? That question can tell you something very different. And here's another thing to watch. Has this changed? Maybe someone has always been slow getting out of a chair. But if they used to stand easily and now they need both hands every single time, that change deserves attention. The same goes for walking. The same goes for stairs. The same goes for getting out of bed. Aging does not mean every change is dangerous, but a noticeable decline in everyday function is worth discussing with a healthcare professional. Because sometimes the most useful clue isn't a number. It's a change you can see. And if a 70-year-old can still stand up, get moving, and handle ordinary parts of the day with reasonable independence, that is an encouraging sign. But movement itself is only the beginning, because how you move can reveal something else. And that's our next clue. Most people don't think twice about walking until walking becomes difficult. Watch a 70-year-old cross a room. Do they hesitate before taking the first step? Do they reach for the wall? Do they shuffle because they no longer trust their balance? Do they avoid turning quickly? Or do they walk with a steady, controlled rhythm that looks natural for their age and ability? Walking is much more complicated than it looks. Your muscles, balance, nervous system, vision, cardiovascular system, and brain all have to work together. That is one reason walking ability and gait have become important measures of physical function in older adults. Mobility is closely tied to independence, and loss of mobility can make everyday activities and living independently much harder. But there's an important distinction here. We're not saying if you walk fast, you'll live longer. That's not what this means. A person with arthritis may walk slowly. A person may have an old injury. Another person may simply have always been a slow walker. The more interesting question is, are you moving confidently for your own body? And even more important, have you become noticeably less confident than you used to be? Maybe 6 months ago, you walked around the neighborhood comfortably. Now you plan every trip around where you can sit down. Maybe you used to turn quickly. Now you stop first because you're afraid of losing your balance. Maybe you used to go shopping alone. Now you've stopped because the walk from the parking lot to the store feels exhausting. Those changes matter. And here's something fascinating. A confident walk isn't just about your legs. It can reflect a person's willingness to use their body. If you're afraid of falling, you move less. When you move less, you may become weaker. When you become weaker, movement can become even harder. So preserving safe movement can help protect a whole chain of independence. That is why everyday movement deserves attention. Now think about the oldest person you know who still seems comfortable moving around. Maybe they are 75, maybe 80, maybe older. What do you notice? Do they still go places? Do they walk around the house without hesitation? Do they still do errands? Do they still get outside? Those simple abilities can tell you that their physical world has not become unnecessarily small. And that brings us to something deeper. Because a person can have a body that still works reasonably well and yet slowly stop using it. Why? Sometimes because they stop having a reason to. Ask a 70-year-old, what are you looking forward to this week? The answer doesn't need to be impressive. Maybe it's lunch with a friend. Maybe it's seeing a grandchild. Maybe it's watering the plants. Maybe it's going fishing. Maybe it's finishing a book. Maybe it's working on a project. Maybe it's going to church. Maybe it's taking the dog outside. Maybe it's simply making a favorite meal. The point isn't how exciting the activity sounds to someone else. The point is that tomorrow still contains something meaningful to you. That's purpose. And purpose doesn't mean being busy every minute. A peaceful life can have purpose. A quiet person can have purpose. Someone who spends most of their time at home can have enormous purpose. The real question is, do you still feel connected to what happens next? Because once a person's world becomes completely empty, other things can begin to shrink with it. They may move less. They may stop getting dressed early. They may stop calling people. They may eat whatever is easiest. They may stop learning. They may spend more time sitting. And eventually, they may stop thinking of themselves as someone who is going somewhere. But look at what happens when the opposite is true. A person has a reason to get up. That reason gets them dressed. Getting dressed gets them moving. Moving gets them outside. Being outside creates a chance to see another person. Seeing another person creates conversation. Conversation creates connection. And suddenly, one little purpose has touched half a dozen areas of life. That's why purpose matters. It doesn't have to be enormous. It simply has to be real. And this is something the people who responded to similar longevity content understood immediately. Older adults often talk about still teaching, still working, still gardening, still building, still traveling, still caring for family, still learning. They don't describe themselves as healthy first. They describe themselves as still doing things. That is powerful. So let me ask you a question. What gives you a reason to get up tomorrow? Not what you're supposed to do, not what someone told you to care about. What actually makes you think, I want to be there for that. Hold on to your answer, because the next sign is what happens when life doesn't go according to plan. And sooner or later, everyone's life does that. A long life isn't a life without problems. That's impossible. At 70, a person may have a difficult week. They may get sick. They may have a minor procedure. They may deal with pain. They may fall. They may lose someone they love. They may go through a stressful period. The interesting question isn't, did something happen? Something always happens. The better question is, what happens afterward? Imagine someone has been knocked off their normal routine. A few days later, are they slowly rebuilding? They start eating normally again. They begin taking short walks. They call someone. They return to their favorite chair. They start doing small tasks. Little by little, they become themselves again. That's recovery. Now compare that with someone who experiences a setback and months later is still saying, I never really got back to normal. That doesn't automatically mean something terrible is happening, but a persistent change in strength, mobility, appetite, thinking, or daily function deserves attention. Because resilience isn't about never falling behind. It's about having some ability to return toward your usual level. And this is where people sometimes misunderstand healthy aging. They think, if I'm aging well, nothing should ever go wrong. No, aging well doesn't mean your body never struggles. It means you're paying attention to what happens when it does. Sometimes the strongest person in the room isn't the person who never needs help. It's the person who notices a problem early, asks for help, follows the plan, and starts rebuilding. So think about your own last difficult week. After it ended, did you eventually return to your normal routine? Or did something change and never really come back? that's worth noticing. And if you are watching this for an older parent or spouse, this is one of the clues you can observe over time. Not how they look on one good day, but whether they gradually recover their usual life after something knocks them off course. Because healthy aging is not just about what the body can do. It's also about how well the body can bounce back. And now, we need to talk about what keeps that body supplied in the first place. When people hear nutrition, they often think about diets. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about whether a person's body is still getting the support it needs. As people age, maintaining muscle and getting adequate nutrition become increasingly important. Muscle strength helps with everyday activities such as getting up from a chair, climbing stairs, and carrying groceries. So look beyond the plate. Look at function. Can the person carry groceries? Can they lift a small bag? Can they get out of a chair? Can they stand long enough to prepare a meal? Do they still have enough energy to get through the afternoon? And look at appetite too. Have they suddenly stopped enjoying food? Are they unintentionally losing weight? Are meals becoming smaller and smaller because eating feels difficult? Have dental problems, swallowing problems, medication, illness, or another issue changed the way they eat? These aren't things to simply blame on age. Sometimes there's a reason that can be addressed. And here's another important point. Healthy nutrition isn't about chasing a perfect body. A 70-year-old does not need to look like a fitness model. The goal is to have enough nourishment and strength to support the life you want to live. That might mean enough strength to walk to the store, enough energy to cook, enough muscle to stand up safely, enough stamina to spend the afternoon with your grandchildren, enough physical reserve to recover when life gets harder. And this is why the chair test from our first sign connects back to nutrition and strength. The signs aren't isolated. They support each other. Movement helps preserve function. Strength makes movement easier. Good nutrition helps support strength. And staying active helps the person keep using that strength. This is what healthy aging often looks like. Not one magic habit. A group of ordinary things working together. But there is another piece to this picture that food and exercise cannot replace. People. There is a huge misunderstanding about social health. People hear "stay social" and imagine a person with a giant circle of friends. That's not necessary. Someone can have 2 close friends and feel deeply connected. Someone else can know 50 people and still feel completely alone. The question is not, how many people do you know? It's, who are you still meaningfully connected to? Maybe it's a spouse, a sibling, a neighbor, a grandchild, an old friend you call every Sunday, a walking group, a hobby group, a religious community, a pet. Someone you regularly help, someone who regularly checks on you. Meaningful social connection supports well-being, while loneliness and social isolation are associated with poorer physical and mental health outcomes in older adults. And connection can create another interesting effect. Someone invites you out. Now you have a reason to get dressed. You leave the house, you walk, you talk, you laugh, you hear something new. You come home. One relationship can create movement, mental stimulation, routine, and emotion all at once. That's why connection is more powerful than simply having company. It gives your day structure. It reminds you that you matter to someone. It gives you stories to tell. It gives you something to look forward to. And sometimes it gives you a reason to keep taking care of yourself. So here's a simple question. Who would notice if you didn't call or show up? And here's another. Who are you still showing up for? If you can answer those questions, you may realize you have something very valuable, a place in the lives of other people. Now let's go one level deeper, because even when you are alone, there's still one relationship you carry everywhere, the relationship between you and your own mind. You don't have to memorize every name. You don't have to remember every detail from yesterday. And you don't have to solve difficult puzzles every morning. Aging normally comes with some changes in memory and processing speed. The more useful question is, are you still interested in the world? Do you ever think, I wonder how that works? Do you still read? Ask questions? Try a new recipe? Learn how to use a new device? Watch something because you want to understand it? Pick up an old hobby again? Start a new one. Talk to someone who knows more than you? Learn something simply because you're curious? That kind of mental engagement matters, because curiosity means the outside world is still getting through. Something happens. You notice it. You want to understand it. You respond. You learn. That's very different from completely withdrawing from the world. And there is something beautiful about older adults who remain curious. They don't need to prove they're young. They just keep learning. A 78-year-old can learn to use a smartphone. A 75-year-old can begin painting. An 82-year-old can become fascinated by astronomy. A 70-year-old can decide to learn a language. There is no age where curiosity suddenly becomes pointless. And research and public health guidance continue to emphasize that older adults can learn new skills and benefit from mentally and socially engaging activities. Now, we also need to be careful. If an older adult develops a noticeable change in memory, reasoning, communication, or ability to manage familiar everyday tasks, that shouldn't simply be dismissed as normal aging. It's something to discuss with a healthcare professional. But occasional forgetfulness is not the same thing as losing your connection with the world. So ask yourself, what are you curious about right now? If there is something you still want to understand, that's worth protecting. Because the future doesn't feel very interesting when you stop being curious about it. And that brings us to something that affects almost every other sign we've talked about: sleep. Sleep changes as we age. Many older adults go to bed earlier, wake earlier, and experience lighter or more interrupted sleep. So this isn't about expecting someone at 70 to sleep exactly the way they did at 30. What matters is whether their sleep is working for them. When you wake up, do you generally feel that your body got a chance to recover? Or do you feel as though you spent the whole night fighting the next day? Do you struggle to stay awake? Are you exhausted before the afternoon is over? Have you suddenly started waking repeatedly? Do you wake with enough energy to function? Quality sleep supports physical and mental health, and poor sleep can affect memory, mood, attention, decision-making, daytime functioning, and safety. And notice how connected this is to everything else. Poor sleep can make movement harder. It can lower motivation. It can make concentration harder. It can affect mood. It can make social interaction feel like work. And if you're tired all day, the world naturally becomes smaller. That's why sleep isn't simply get 8 hours because the internet says so. It's about whether your body is getting enough quality rest to function. And if your sleep has changed significantly, especially if you wake exhausted, despite spending enough time in bed or have persistent sleep problems, it's worth talking with a healthcare professional. So think about your last 7 mornings. When you opened your eyes, Did you feel like you had received a real break? Or did you wake already tired? That answer doesn't predict your lifespan, but it tells you something about how your body is handling recovery right now. And we've reached the final sign. It's not a blood test. It's not a walking test. It's not something you can measure with a watch, but it may be one of the most meaningful signs of all. Think about the difference between these two statements. I've already done most of what I wanted to do, and next year I want to. That second sentence contains something powerful. Expectation, a future, a reason to keep going. Maybe the plan is a big trip. Maybe it is a birthday celebration. Maybe it's seeing a grandchild graduate. Maybe it's planting a garden next spring. Maybe it's visiting an old friend. Maybe it's finishing a project around the house. Maybe it's learning something new. Maybe it's simply having Sunday lunch with family. The plan doesn't have to impress anyone. It only has to matter to you. Because one of the deepest human desires is not merely to live longer. It's to have more life to live, more mornings, more conversations, more ordinary meals, more laughter, more places to go, more people to see, more things to learn, more moments where you think, I'm glad I was here for that. That's why this final sign ties the entire video together. A long life without meaning can feel empty. But more years with movement, independence, relationships, curiosity, purpose, and the ability to enjoy ordinary moments, that's what many people actually want. And that is why the viewer comments from videos like this are so revealing. People don't simply say, I'm 80. They say, I'm 80 and still swimming. I'm 78 and still working. I'm 75 and still walking. I'm 71 and still teaching. I'm 85 and still doing my own things. They're not celebrating a number. They're celebrating the fact that their life is still happening. And maybe that's the better question, not how many years do I have left, but am I still building a life worth waking up for? If the answer is yes, protect it. Now step back and look at the entire picture. A 70-year-old who is aging well, maybe someone who can still get up and move through ordinary life. Someone whose walking remains reasonably confident for their own abilities. Someone who has a reason to get up in the morning. Someone who can gradually recover after setbacks. Someone who is maintaining the nutrition and strength needed for daily life. Someone who still has meaningful connections. Someone who remains curious. Someone whose sleep generally allows recovery. And someone who still makes plans for a future they expect to enjoy. No single sign can tell you how long a person will live. Not the chair, not walking speed, not sleep, not purpose, not any single habit. But together, these signs can paint a picture of something much more useful. How much reserve and participation a person still has in everyday life. And that's the key. Healthy aging isn't about defeating your age. It's about preserving your ability to live inside it. Maybe you don't walk as quickly as you did at 40. That's okay. Maybe you have some aches. Maybe you take medication. Maybe you need more rest than you used to. That's part of being human. The question is whether you are still able to do the things that make your life yours. Can you still move? Can you still connect? Can you still learn? Can you still recover? Can you still make plans? Can you still care about tomorrow? Because those are the things that turn a collection of years into a life. If you recognized several of these signs in yourself, take that as encouragement, not as a guarantee. You don't need 9 out of 9. You don't need to be perfect. Maybe your sleep isn't great. Maybe your knees are bothering you. Maybe you move slower than you used to. Maybe you live alone. That doesn't mean your story is over. Instead, look for the areas where you still have room to protect your independence and function. Maybe it's moving a little more safely. Maybe it's asking about a change in your health. Maybe it's eating more consistently. Maybe it's reconnecting with someone. Maybe it's finally starting the hobby you've been putting off. Maybe it's making a plan for next month. Small choices can matter because a long life is not made from one giant decision. It's made from thousands of ordinary days. And if you're watching this, because you're worried about your mother, father, spouse, grandparent, or friend, remember something important. Don't turn these 9 signs into a test they have to pass. Don't say, you don't have number 6, so you're unhealthy. Instead, notice changes gently. Are they moving less? Are they suddenly struggling with a chair they used to get out of easily? Have they stopped going places? Are they losing weight without trying? Are they sleeping terribly? Have they stopped seeing people? Have they lost interest in everything? Are they not recovering from setbacks the way they used to? Those changes don't automatically mean something serious, but they can be reasons to start a conversation. Sometimes the best thing you can say is, I've noticed things seem a little different lately. How are you really feeling? Not, you're getting old. Just, how are you really doing? That question can open a door. And sometimes that door is more valuable than any checklist. Maybe the real sign of a long life isn't one number. Maybe it is a person who keeps showing up for the people they love, showing up for the things they care about, showing up for another morning, another walk, another conversation, another project, another meal, another laugh, another plan, another chance to say, I'm still here. No one can guarantee how many birthdays any person will have, but you can protect the things that make those birthdays meaningful. Movement, strength, connection, curiosity, purpose, recovery, rest, hope, and the willingness to keep participating in your own life. Because living longer is one thing, but having more good life inside those years is something much more valuable. So before you leave, tell me one thing. Which of these signs do you recognize most strongly in yourself or in someone you love? Is it movement, purpose, recovery, connection, curiosity, sleep, or making plans for the future? And if this video gave you a different way to look at aging, share it with someone who might need that reminder. Getting older does not mean your story suddenly becomes smaller. Sometimes it simply means you understand what matters more clearly. Take care of yourself. Stay curious. Keep moving in whatever way is safe and appropriate for you. Keep caring, and most importantly, keep showing up for your life. I'll see you in the next video.